Actor Sir Derek Jacobi lives in North London with his partner Richard.
Is he masking me?
He's recently won viewers' hearts in the romantic comedy Last Tango in Halifax.
Celia.
How are you?
Oh, not so bad.
Derek made his name performing on stage and in television dramas like I, Claudius.
I'm Iberius Claudius. Oh, Sister Amanicus.
Oh, that Claudius.
And has starred in films like Gosford Park, Gladiator, and Cinderella.
I think one of the reasons that I've always been an actor, and I wanted to be an actor, was that when you're acting, you know the plot, you know how it's going to end. There's a degree of security in that. Whereas in real life, you don't know what's going to happen.
That side's all right. I think we need to look at the back there.
Mum predeceased Dad. Mum got to 70, Dad got to 90. She went too soon, really. I regret that I didn't ask enough questions when I was young. I didn't quiz my parents. But this program, hopefully, is going to fill in some of the answers. That's the excitement of it, and it's the trepidation of it. I don't know the end of it, I don't know the plot. And that is very frightening, but also very exciting.
Sir Derek Jacobi was knighted by the Queen at Buckingham Palace in 1994.
It's very different.
But comes from more modest East London roots.
It all started here.
Were you actually born here?
I was born in that room. I was born in 38. I was a mistake. Because they knew war was coming, and they hadn't planned on having a baby at that time. I was an only child, and spoiled rotten, but survived it.
It was a small family, very close, very loving. East London, bit Gorblimey, very ordinary, very ordinary.
I was quite brainy in those days. I went to university. My subject was history, and I got a state scholarship, and I went to Cambridge, but really only as a way of having a second string to my bow to please Mum and Dad.
Derek knows that his father's family, the Jacobis, were bootmakers who had originally come from Germany. So he wants to find out about his mother's side of the family.
They were a Hackney family, and they were very poor, I think. My mother's grandmother is the intriguing one. My mother said she was part French, and she went by I think, the most wonderful name. Her name was Salome Lapland. Salome Lapland. You couldn't make it up, could you, really?
Derek is on the trail of his maternal family's origins. He's revisiting a childhood haunt on Walthamstow High Street.
Saturday nights were always pie and mash time. Wednesdays were fish and chips, Saturdays was pie and mash. And I didn't really like the eels. They served eels, I didn't like that. But I loved the mash and the gravy that they put on it. And here we are. Wonderful.
Derek's arranged to meet historian Sarah Wise.
Hello, how do you do?
Nice to see you. And you.
To find out more about his maternal great-grandmother, Salome, and her family.
My mother said there was a French connection. She was partly French, or she was French, or
Yes.
but that is all I know. Salome for me is covered with many veils.
Yes.
And I want them to be uncovered.
Right, well, here's the first veil coming off.
Oh,
Salome's
God.
1859 birth certificate.
Salome. Laplan?
Laplan.
Her father was called Armand Laplan. Laplan. So she was French.
She was indeed. So if we go back further to the 1841 census, we can find her father, Armand, again here.
He was 15.
I don't know if you can spot there. Although he's just 15, he's already working as a brazier or a brass worker.
And what are these all
They're all his siblings.
siblings?
So we've got Hannah here. She's 13. David.
My God, there were a lot
There's
of
a
them.
lot of them.
Oh, yes.
And they're living in Hackney.
In East London.
So we've got more on Armand here. 6 years later,
1847.
this is his application for relief from the Bethnal Green parish.
What, for poor relief?
Yes,
He's now a woodcutter.
he's a woodcutter, which is much less skilled than being a brass worker.
Yes. No, he's obviously fallen on hard
He
times.
has.
Oh, God. I was hoping there'd be money in the past. Obviously not. He's living at 5 Digby Walk in Bethnal Green.
Digby Walk turns up on a campaigning piece of literature by a doctor called Hector Gavin, who wrote a book called Sanitary Ramblings, all about how dreadful
Can't wait
these-
to read it.
Well, here it is for you to read. If you see what he says about Digby
Sanitary
Walk,
Ramblings,
there's
what?
this.
More than half of this horrid alley is covered with a stagnant pool of most offensive and filthy slime and mud, in some places to the depth of a foot. The refuse from a pigsty drains into this gutter and adds pungency to its offensiveness. Oh, they had a tough time, didn't
They
they?
really did.
Really tough. Yes.
But if we fast forward to 1891, we can see another family member, his sister. Do you remember Hannah from the 1841
Oh,
census?
yes.
Here she is.
Anna Sudbury,
That's her married name.
we do.
She's getting on in years. She's been widowed. She's finding it hard, as many elderly women did, to make a living. And look where she's ended up.
The French Hospital.
French hospital
The French Hospital. In Hackney.
in Hackney. Her choice was to go either into the workhouse or to go into a workhouse infirmary. But a charitable hospital like this is
Yeah.
a much, much better bet.
Great building.
Gorgeous.
Looks like a French chateau.
It's being used as a school building now.
Golly. Do we know why she was in the French hospital?
We do.
Ooh.
What we have here is her application or her petition to be allowed in.
The hospital for poor French Protestants and their descendants.
Now, the French hospital was specifically for French Protestant, or descendants of the French Protestant refugees, the Huguenots.
So it was her Frenchness
Exactly
that
right.
got her in. Hannah Sudbury, widow,
Descended.
descended from Joseph de Laplan, who refuged in the year 1702.
So Joseph is your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather.
Great. 6 greats.
6 of them.
6 of them. Wow.
He was one of the Huguenots who was fleeing persecution
Yes.
in 1685.
By the revocation of the Edict of Nantes.
That's
Of course, yes.
In 1685, Catholic King Louis XIV of France revoked the Edict of Nantes. which had previously given Protestants the right to religious freedom. By changing the law, Louis branded non-Catholics as heretics and sanctioned their persecution. As a result, thousands of French Protestants, or Huguenots, sought refuge in England. England had been a Protestant country ever since Henry VIII split with Rome, nearly 150 years earlier. Derek's mother Daisy had told him there was a French connection through his great-grandmother Salome. He's discovered that his family are indeed descended from a Huguenot refugee, Joseph de la Plagne. The Huguenots were famed for their craftsmanship, especially silk weaving. Many settled around Spitalfields, not far from where Derek grew up.
I know that Huguenots came to this part of London and lived here and worked here. Nearly all silk weavers. Whether Joseph was one of them, I don't know.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Come in.
Thank you.
Derek's visiting a house which has been recreated to show what life for a Huguenot weaver would have been like.
They were given safe refuge to settle in this district. And that, of course, brought the word refugee
Yes.
into our language.
Yeah, it was used as a verb.
Yes.
David Milne is the curator.
Early 18th century Spitalfields house. This gives you an idea of exactly how the weavers would have lived.
God, it's like a stage set.
They fled here with very little, apart from the skill which was their hands and the knowledge of how to make these textiles. And then they were given passage to come and live just outside of the city, to work here without the control of the city guilds. And then they made the most sensational textiles.
And they lived and worked in here.
Yes, there could have been a couple of number of looms, and then the family working and living within these tiny, cramped conditions. They were like factories, kind of just tenements with endless looms. You can see there's a sensational image on the wall there.
I didn't realize how big the looms were.
15,000 looms at work all day long, making this
15,000?
constant noise. Well, there were 50,000 people here.
It must have been incredible, incredible. In a foreign land, not speaking the language.
But they were not isolated. You know, they came in such vast numbers and settled, and then they built this industry.
So I was told that my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Joseph de la Plagne, came over in 1702.
Right. Well, that's late for an arrival, because you think all the weavers, the first wave of them, where they came in their thousands.
Yes,
So
the revocation was 1685.
He wouldn't have been in that first wave of
Not the first
people
wave,
that
no.
fled.
Would he not have been a weaver then, do you think?
I don't think he would have been. The name's an indication. Because Dela's very grand name. When most of the people that came here, the weavers, they had very simple names.
I see. It might have been something grander and posher than that.
With the name, I think what you need to do is head across the channel to Paris.
I think that's a very good idea. I've been to France and Paris many times, but never on the Eurostar. So it's rather exciting. And going to find out who I am makes it even more exciting. I'm going to relish every moment of it.
Derek knows nothing about his 6 times great-grandfather, Joseph de la Plagne, apart from his name and the fact that he arrived in England in 1702 as a Protestant refugee.
I don't know very much about the persecution of the Protestants
that's really the excitement of this journey. I'm going to find all these things out that I'm ignorant about. I shouldn't be, particularly because I studied history at university, but that indeed was a long time ago. As far as persecution is concerned, I'm not religious. I have no religion, and organized religion terrifies the bejesus out of me. I think so much that is awful in the world is because of religion. But we're now on the trail of Joseph de la Plagne, and we're starting off in Paris.
Derek's visiting the Protestant Historical Society of Paris,
Hello, Derek.
Hello, nice to see you.
where he hopes to find out more about Joseph, with the help of historian Dr. Frank Tallett.
Through here and find out some more information about your ancestor. It's beautiful hall.
Isn't it?
Isn't it scrumptious? Well, remarkably, we've been able to find quite a number of references to Joseph de la Plagne in the French archives. And one of the earliest we've got is this, which is a listing of individuals who swore an oath in the town of Bordeaux. And there he is, in 1667, on the 3rd of December.
Oh, yes, there. Joseph de la Plagne, avocat, lawyers, and what a greffier en chef. What is a greffier?
Well, greffier is normally translated as clerk, but that would really be a mistranslation here, because he's got one of the top jobs in the royal bureaucracy that administered the royal lands in the province of Guyenne. So he's really a financier who advanced the king money in return for the right to collect the taxes. He's clearly quite an important figure.
And this is Louis XIV?
This is, 1667, so this is during the reign of Louis XIV. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going up in the world, aren't we?
He's clearly a wealthy man.
Yes.
And an important man.
You see, I've always known it.
There you are.
I've always known it. All the kings I've played, all the thrones I've sat on in the course of my career. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. Do we know how old he was then?
He'd have been about 28 or 29. We think he's born in 1638-39.
How interesting. My birthday is 1938.
Well,
So,
what a remarkable coincidence.
Yes, wonderful.
Well, the second document we've got sheds even more light on his status as well.
Oh, crests.
This is his.
A white dog chasing an orange stag on a red background.
It doesn't mean to say that he was a noble, but he's clearly got a lot of status.
I mean, I'm so excited. We've gone from almost the poorhouse in the East End to this rather grand, very influential, crested gentleman in France.
Absolutely.
I presume, since he was engaged in financing His Majesty, that he would have, do you think, visited Versailles? He'd known the king?
Whether he knew the king personally, we don't know. We don't have any record of that. But certainly as a man who was high up in the world of finance, he would have had to be in Paris and have attended the court at Versailles.
Yes.
Because that's really where his contacts would have been.
Yes.
Known as the Sun King, Louis XIV had established himself as an absolute monarch. He built a glittering court at Versailles and surrounded himself with loyal Catholic subjects. But this lavish regime was costly, so Louis had an army of financiers, such as Joseph, raising money for him.
He's a lawyer, he's got a top job in the royal bureaucracy, he's a well-to-do financier. But he also lives under a dark cloud, because we know that he's a Protestant. And so he's a man who is threatened with the loss of his social status and his wealth, because during the reign of Louis XIV, the Protestants come in for a good deal of persecution. And we have an engraving of some of this, which shows some of the elements of persecution, the atrocities that are committed against young children in order to get the parents to convert.
Oh, God. Oh, heavens. They're throwing a child out of the window.
Yeah. In the background, they're dismantling a Protestant church.
What particularly was it about the Protestant ethic that they were also anti or afraid of? It seemed to me that certainly when they got to England, the Huguenots were hard workers. They were.
Well, there's always a suspicion in France that the Protestants are Republican in some way. And so they're a threat in this respect to the French monarchy. So life became pretty difficult.
Very, very difficult.
And they're not massacred in the 1680s, but the treatment of them is pretty dreadful. Yeah. And there's a second engraving here which shows some further aspects of this.
Oh my God. This looks like a massacre to me. They're burning them, they are hanging them, shooting them, drowning them. Wow, horrendous.
And in the background here, you can see the desecration of Protestant cemeteries.
So how did Joseph survive then all this?
In order to survive, he must have converted, at least nominally, pretended to be a Catholic.
Yes.
And this would have meant him going to church on a few occasions.
He's a cunning old thing, isn't he, this guy?
He is a cunning old thing.
Yeah.
Because at any moment, somebody could have pulled the rug on him, revealed that he was secretly a Protestant, that he was still a Protestant believer, and this would have been the end for him. We've got a couple of further documents. They're both dated 1699, which show that he's still holding this office of greffier. He's referred to as being a counsellor of the king, and there's your ancestor's signature at the bottom.
God. Oh, that's...
It's thrilling.
Oh,
Isn't it?
it is very thrilling. He actually wrote that.
He wrote.
Yes. It's a very confident signature. It's very showy. With a line underneath.
He's no shrinking violet.
He's no shrinking violet, no. Oh, how wonderful to have that.
I think it's pretty remarkable that there's so much in the archives about Joseph de la Plaine.
Yes. Do we know who Joseph married?
Well, there's no record that he got married nor that he had children. But maybe he can't bring himself to marry in a Catholic church and swear to bring up children as Catholics. It's just a step too far. He's clearly a man who's tussling with his conscience.
But he had to live a life of subterfuge.
He does, yes. Yeah. We know that he's leading this very dangerous double life until at least 1699. But I think you mentioned that you knew that he came to England.
He came to England in 1702.
Right.
So what happened in those last 3 years that persuaded him to give it all up? Yeah.
Well, we've got another piece of documentary evidence which we can have a look at, which tells us what happened to him. And this is from a dictionary of Protestant families in Bordeaux.
In 1700 or 1701, he was arrested.
Yeah.
Imprisoned in Bordeaux, then at the Chateau of Loches. He was in prison.
We don't know why he was arrested, but it's as a Protestant that he was transferred to this prison at Loches. And he would have been transferred there on the orders of the king, not by order of the court, but through a lettre de cachet, which Louis XIV
himself
would have signed.
Gosh. The castle that he was transferred to, the Chateau de Loches, is that still with us? Or?
It is. It's an old medieval fortress, which was turned into a prison, and it's still there. It's preserved, and you can visit the cells and the dungeons where prisoners were kept. Yeah.
Joseph was taken from his home city of Bordeaux to the town of Loches, over 200 miles away in the Loire Valley.
I wasn't expecting it to be so big.
No, it's quite a dominant place, isn't it?
Yeah, rather beautiful town too.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
The fortress is rather different.
Now surrounded by a town, the castle complex of Loches is protected by 5-metre-high stone walls. This fortified gateway is still the only way in or out.
Pretty impressive, isn't
It is pretty formidable, isn't it?
Yeah.
One just wonders how he came here.
Yeah.
He would be in chains,
In chains? Do you
on
think?
a cart, maybe.
Oh dear. Poor old Joseph.
The castle was once a home to kings and nobles. But in the 15th century, part of it was converted into a state prison.
That looks nasty, doesn't it?
That-
Wow, it's huge.
Pretty grim, isn't it?
Grim is not the word. That's dreadful.
By the time Joseph was brought to Loches in 1701, it was notorious for its treatment of high-profile prisoners.
Oh my. Gets grimmer and grimmer.
It gets worse the farther you go in. I think.
Golly, look at that.
I'll go ahead and open the gate.
Joseph was in his early 60s when he was locked up here, potentially for life.
God, that looks ominous. What is that?
Prisoners were singled out for special treatment. They might be put in this cage.
Oh, I hope he wasn't a very tall man. Can only just stand upright.
We know that Protestants in particular receive special treatment. They have dead animals thrown into the cells with them. They're given food and drink, but it would be put just out of their reach, so they couldn't get to it. They'd be kept in chains.
Oh,
Some of the Protestants were encouraged to convert and become
that will get them out.
and that would get them out. But it's not really an option for Joseph de la Plaine because he's lived so long as a nominal Catholic that if he was to say, I'm converting, who would believe
Who would
him?
believe him?
So when he's put in here, he knows he's here forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's played a blinder so far, but it's tripped
He's
him
lost
up.
everything, really.
It's tripped him up.
Yeah.
And of course, he's not a young man, is he? He's in his early 60s.
So he's a man now he's got no alternative, really. He either comes to the end of his days in the prison or he tries to escape.
But how? Can you imagine getting out of a place like this?
Well, we've got a bit of a clue as to what happened to him in this book. It's a book on the prisoners of Loches, and he's referred to here in this paragraph.
In the same month of June, a Lord La Plaine, transferred from the prisons of Bordeaux toward the end of 1702, he had succeeded in saving himself from the stranger. What does that mean? No, that's my translation.
Escaping and getting abroad.
Ah!
So that's...
He had succeeded in saving himself and getting aboard, à l'étranger.
The archives are not very complete, but he's pretty unusual, pretty rare in being able to get away.
Yeah. Do we know how?
I guess bribery. He may have had contacts on the outside.
Yes. Yes, I see. Yeah. That seems the likeliest, doesn't it?
That seems the most
Yes,
probable thing that
rather
happened.
than kind of shinning down with the sheets tied together and all that, since he didn't have any sheets.
No, and he's 62, 63,
Yes.
and the escape itself is not without danger.
No,
If he was caught while he was escaping,
that
then
would be it. That-
well, the penalty was to be sent to the galleys.
Oh, God. And this is what he was risking.
This is exactly what he was risking. It was pretty awful. He'd be chained to an oar 24 hours a day. We've got records of Huguenots being whipped on these ships and dying of their wounds. They're singled out for special treatment. There's a punishment called the bastinado, where their feet are whipped.
I'd have preferred to stay in prison, actually. I mean, he was risking this.
Yeah. So for a man like Joseph Laplaine, who's in his early 60s, this would have been a
Absolute
a
death sentence. Absolute death sentence. And this is what he was risking.
That's absolutely what he was
by
risking.
escaping. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a brave fellow, Joseph.
He was a brave old fellow.
Genius and brave, yes. What's the next step? How did he get
Well,
out of the country?
Again, we're not sure, but the most likely way is that he managed to escape down the River Loire, and the river is guarded by customs officers.
Ah, yes.
And he'd have had to navigate around those officers.
Yes. More bribing, you think?
More bribing, yeah. And boarded a ship and got away to England.
It must have been pretty daunting to arrive on the English coast, disembark from his ship across the channel.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's mind-boggling, really. All at the age of 60 odd. I'm beginning to admire Joseph, very much indeed. He'd lived a kind of double life. One of Louis XIV's financiers, while at the same time being a Protestant. Life must have been pretty edgy for him. His whole story zings with resourcefulness. To escape and leave the country, that required courage, that required resolve. And I do hope that we discover the bond that links me to Joseph, because I do admire him, and I want to be part of his family.
In 1702, Derrick's 6 times great-grandfather, Joseph de Laplaine, arrived in London. Derrick wants to find out whether Joseph was able to continue his career as a financier and lawyer in England.
Hello again.
He is meeting legal records expert Susan Moore at one of London's oldest centres of law, Lincoln's Inn.
It's been fascinating, hunting down my ancestor called Joseph de Laplaine, and I'm wondering if he resumed his lawyer's life, or what became of him, in fact.
Well, it seems he didn't take up a legal career. However, he was involved in a legal case in the Court of Chancery. And the Court of Chancery was occasionally held here in this building. People didn't have to appear in court to give evidence. It was all written down. So from our point of view now, it's excellent because we have these big documents. Right, if we look, we've got Joseph de Laplaine.
Oh, yes.
That's his name.
Yes.
We've got the date there, the 1st of May, 1703. And he's bringing the case against Jane de Baynac. And we have her name there.
Jane de Baynac.
Reading the original is quite difficult,
Yes,
so if you'd like to have a
I
look
see.
at the transcript.
In the year of our Lord 1690, one Jane de Baynac, single woman, a French Protestant, acquainted your auditor of her intentions to make her escape as soon as she could. Now, your auditor is Joseph.
The orator is Joseph.
Your auditor assisted her in making her escape first and laid out several sums to take care and manage.
It's talking about his money. And He's going to work together with Jane.
He's giving her money and lodging money with her.
Yes.
For his future use.
For his future
Yeah.
use, yes. That's the point that he's trying to make.
Yes.
It's being done in secret. He can't legally send money out of the country.
Yes. So he did start kind of filtering it away
Yeah.
early on, foreseeing that he might at some point have to leave.
Yeah. He had no idea it was going to take 10 years.
No.
Because these are very long documents, it's not sensible to read the whole thing word for word, but what we do discover is that it's in June 1691 that she goes, and we then get a long list of the money that he gives to her via various other merchants and financiers. Then we come on to this bit here where he sort of sums up what he's done.
Your auditor is very well assured the said Jane de Baynac received the sum of 13,500 livres, your auditor's own proper money, and so remitted and sent for your auditor's sole benefit.
Now, the amount of money, the 13,500, if you calculate that in today's terms, that's about £80,000. I mean, that's...
Well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So, you know, his relationship with her, there's obviously a lot of trust.
Yes. I just hope his trust is in the right place. I've got a feeling that she's going to do the dirty on him.
Something's going to happen.
Something's going to
This is a
happen.
court case, after all.
Yes, he might trust her, but
Yeah.
I am having my doubts about her.
Yes. He's obviously going to arrive and expect, well, to get his money, do we think? Yes.
Jane de Baynac sometimes pretends your auditor never remitted any money at all to her. At other times, Jane pretends that the money so sent to her by your auditor was her own money. Oh, she's a case, isn't she?
She is.
Jane.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But you could see it coming. Strangely, for a lawyer and a financier, knowing what money does to people, to trust her from that distance, you know.
And for that length of time.
And for that length of time.
Yes. I mean, it's 10 years, 1691 it starts. So, that's his side of the story. The next document...
Is this her?
This is her response. And we get here, it's called The Answer of Jane de Baynac, defendant.
In the year of our Lord, 1690 or thereabouts, she came to Paris. The complainant made her frequent visits. Ah, it's warming up.
Yeah.
And at one time gave her to understand that he would procure her to make her escape into another kingdom, if she would promise to marry him. Oh, she's something else.
Yes. He comes, Joseph comes with his
With
servant.
his servant, came to this defendant's lodgings. The defendant was surprised to be arrested in an action of above £2,000, upon which said arrest, she hath been a prisoner in the Queen's Bench.
He's actually got her put in prison, and it was a debtor's prison rather than a criminal type of prison. He's trying to bring a case in the court of the Queen's Bench. For that court, you had to have written proof of your debt. While you were gathering your evidence, your opponent was put into the debtor's prison.
So she went to prison for 4 months?
Yeah. At his instigation.
Yes. Good on you, Joe. It's no more than she deserves, because I don't believe her. She's the one who's been lying and taking him for a ride.
We then find that the case didn't proceed in the Queen's Bench. Presumably, he couldn't get enough evidence. That's why it comes to the Court of Chancery, where it's one person's word against the other.
So who finally decided?
Well, most Chancery cases don't ever reach any judgment.
Any decision?
No. So Joseph will have been the one in charge because he brought the case. He will have either settled or dropped, we don't know.
Yeah.
But certainly it doesn't proceed any further.
It's not very satisfying, is it, really?
No.
I mean, it's just
But
dropped.
I don't know, these records, they give you such a personal side of
They do,
people.
well, they do, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't yet know how much longer he survived, and what he did. We know that he didn't marry, and they didn't have children in France.
Well, we assume he married, because otherwise, how would you be here?
Well, exactly. I mean,
Yes.
that is the
Yes.
question that's been bugging me all the time.
Yeah.
Do we
think-
find out that?
Probably the next stage would be for you to go to Soho. A lot of people know about the Huguenots who were silk weavers and ended up in Spitalfields, places like that.
That's where I started.
Actually, these financial type Huguenots were based much more around Soho, and there is still a Protestant church in Soho which may well have some records which might throw some light on what happened next.
Get me a taxi at once. I long to find out how long Joseph lived, what he did in the latter part of his life, because he must have had children. That I still don't know anything about that. And that's the next thing that I must know, exactly where I fit into the whole scheme of things.
In the early 18th century, Soho in central London was so full of Huguenots that it was known as Petit France, or Little France. Now, the only remaining French Protestant church is in Soho Square. Derek's meeting historian Tessa Murdoch.
I'm here to find out more about Joseph's personal life. We've discovered quite a lot about him until now, what he was up to, things that happened to him, but I'm longing to find out ultimately where I come in.
Well, I think this is a rather exciting bit of information.
There's the name. There's the huge signature that he had. 30th of July, 1708. Which day approved formally Joseph Laplaine of the parish of St. Giles in the Fields in the county of Middlesex, aged 70 years, and a bachelor, who allegeth that he intendeth to marry with Salome La Bastide of the parish of St. Martin's in the Fields in the county of Middlesex, aforesaid 25 years, and a spinster. God, 70, and she was 25. And her name was Salome, like my mother's grandmother.
It's a family name.
It is a family, yes.
How exciting.
Wow. As they say, there's a turn-up for the book. Salome La Bastide. Almost as good as Salome Lapland. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I'm so glad he got married at last. I'm so glad he made it. You've got lots of other things there.
Yes, this is something rather special, actually. It's.
Oh, and there's his crest. The hound chasing the stag. But it's developed now. It's got this other side to it, this tree and...
Well, we think that is the coat of arms of the La Bastide family.
Demeure pour revivre. I die in order to live again.
Exactly.
The phoenix is born again in fire.
And perhaps that could be a reference to Joseph de la Plaine's new life, leaving France behind him.
Oh, yes.
And starting again in
Yes,
London.
Yes, that's a nice thought. Very nice thought. Yes. You know, suddenly I'm feeling close to him. I found out all sorts of things that happened to him, and what he did, but now I'm getting a feel of Joseph himself, and also I'm getting a feel of where I fit into the picture. I can't lay claim to it.
Well, I think you can.
Could I?
Yes. It's the coat of arms of your ancestors.
Yes, you're quite right.
So that's the marriage, and 9 months later...
Madame Salome de la Plaine. Have you got the translation?
English translation.
Yes, that helps me. I certify that on the 28th of May, in the year 1709, I baptized Guillaume de la Plaine. That is William.
Yes.
Yep, William de la Plaine. The legitimate son of his parents, Monsieur Joseph de la Plaine and Madame Salome de la Plaine. He was presented at the baptism by his godparents, the very honourable Guillaume William Kendish, my lord, Duke of Devonshire, and by Madame Marie de la Bastide,
who is Salome's sister-in-law. It's worth looking at the witnesses of the baptism because they include Armand de la Bastide, who is the brother of Salome.
And his godfather was very grand. The Duke of Devonshire, no less.
Here is the Duke, painted in his robes as a Knight of the Order of the Garter, which I think he was awarded in that very year.
I'm sort of lost words at the moment. Here he is, mixing with the nobility of England, fathering a child at the age of 71. Now what happened to Joseph? Did he live happily ever after?
Well, the next document, it's rather sober. I think his hourglass has run dry.
Oh, this is a will. When did he die?
I think he died in January 1710, so about 8 months later.
Yes. Oh, that's very sad.
The young mother is a widow.
Obviously taken out of him, hadn't it, all that? But she is now a widow with a son. What happened to them?
Well, fast forward some 20 or more years, and here is an exciting announcement in Reed's Weekly Journal for March the 6th, 1736, in Shropshire.
The Reverend Mr. Laplain, chaplain to His Grace the Duke of Devonshire and vicar of Rockwarden in the county of Salop, was lately married to Mrs. Sanford, a well-accomplished young gentlewoman of a great family and a good fortune. This is William, who would have been my great-grandfather 5 times removed. He's a reverend. Chaplain to the Duke of Devonshire.
Which indicates that he must have been properly educated, and we are excited to discover that he attended Cambridge and was at Trinity Hall.
I was next door in St. John's.
There you are.
Oh, gosh. And he's already the name is changing. The Reverend Mr. Laplain.
So he's based in Shropshire, but described as chaplain to the Duke of Devonshire.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So they kept up the connection with the Duke of Devonshire.
It seems to have been a family affair.
Yes. The connection must, I think, have come through Salome de la Bastide.
Well, we do have a clue to the connection. This is a letter from Salome and Armand's father, dated September 1691.
Sir, I thought it necessary to get acquaintances of some great lords, whose friendship I have procured by 1,000 dangers of war. These lords had the goodness to present me and my son to the king, your great monarch, who had the goodness to promise me that he would take care of him, and my intentions have always been that he should follow the martial life. So, this is Salome's father.
Yes.
Promoting his son.
Presumably Armand.
To be in the army. To be
in the service of, at this stage, William III. Because it's dated
1691.
1691.
That's 3 years after the Glorious Revolution.
So maybe that Devonshire connection is very closely linked with loyalty and support for the new monarch.
For the new monarch, yes.
Originally from Holland, King William III had been invited to take the English throne by a group of Protestant lords, which included the Duke of Devonshire's father. When King James II had been crowned 3 years earlier, in 1685, English Protestants became worried. James was the first Catholic monarch for well over a century, and a cousin of Louis XIV. So English Protestants feared they would suffer the same fate as the French Huguenots. William's bid to overthrow James would become known as the Glorious Revolution. Derrick's come to William III's London residence, Kensington Palace, to meet historian Dr. Gabriel Glickman.
Very nice to meet you.
And you too. Love your house.
It's not bad, is it? Yes.
Derrick wants to find out what role his 6 times great-grandmother's family, the de la Bastides, had in William's army, and whether they were involved in the Glorious Revolution.
Salome's father, Jean, and her brother, Armand, are professional soldiers, and they're fighting in the wars that break out across Europe in the later 1680s. And they're quite literally fighting for their faith. William sends out the call of the recruitment across Protestant Europe, and we can see here that his army was beginning to assume a very international composition.
The Huguenot cavalry were provisionally enrolled in 2 regiments of blue and red dragoons. The officers of the Blues included La Bastide, Armand de la Bastide.
And William really values the experience of these men.
Yes.
So when the army sets sail from the Netherlands in October 1688, it's been estimated that roughly 10% of William's army was composed of Huguenots. And they land at Brixham Harbour in Devon on the 5th of November 1688.
As William's army marched on London, Catholic King James II's regime collapsed, and James himself fled to France. Protestant William and his wife Mary were crowned as joint monarchs in 1689, and this glorious revolution seemed to secure England as a Protestant country.
But the threat is not over, because very soon James II is sailing back with an army funded by Louis XIV, and they land in Ireland. William knows that he can rely absolutely on his Huguenots.
On the Huguenots.
Because they had everything invested.
Of whom Armand is one. Yes.
William starts assembling his troops, giving them passes to move into Ireland.
And here we have Lieutenant Armand de la Bastide, his servant and 1 horse with his goods and necessaries to go to Highlake and thence to Ireland, dated the 18th of June, 1690.
So
now,
Ireland...
This is going to be the Battle of the Boyne, isn't it?
This all leads up to the Battle of the Boyne.
The famous
critical encounter.
Yeah.
Ireland had long been a battleground between Catholics and Protestants. But the fight between James and William's armies at the River Boyne was for more than just the British crown. It was for the balance of power in Europe.
It results in a spectacular victory for the Protestant forces. It's a tremendous triumph for William. It's also a tremendous triumph for Armand, that he's proved his mettle in one of the most dangerous and unpredictable conflicts in British history.
Wow. What relation would he be to me? Something very complicated.
So he would be great-uncle 7 times over, I think?
Yes. Great-uncle 7 times over.
In December 1691, an act is passed in Parliament naturalising as Englishmen a handful of William's most trusted, most loyal followers. And here...
And it includes Armand de la Bastide, son of Colonel John de la Bastide. Now, that was a huge honour.
It's a huge honour, tremendous accolade. So Armand is now really part of the England created in the Glorious Revolution, and we can see him rising through the ranks.
Armand de la Bastide, to be exempt and eldest captain, dated Whitehall, 20th of January.
1694.
1694.
The regiment is very significant. This is the lifeguards. It's the traditional protectors of the monarchy on the battlefield and in times of peace. It's also highly socially exclusive, that it's very difficult to get into that regiment if you are not of noble or gentry blood.
So my great-grandfather, 6 times removed, Joseph, when he married Salome, was marrying into a very high-class family.
Socially and professionally, and we see here again in 1705, much later, another promotion.
Oh, here he is. Armand de la Bastide, to be guidon?
Guidon, and the guidon was the man who bore the standard of the 3rd Troop of Horse Guards. And this regiment is the forerunner to the Queen's Household Cavalry, the mounted bodyguard of the royal family.
And he was the standard bearer
He is the
of
standard
that
bearer.
regiment. And he's going up and up and up,
It's an
isn't he?
extraordinary summit to a military career for
Yes.
a man who came into England as part of an invading army and as a Protestant refugee.
Yes. I had no idea that his journey was going to end up here and with somebody quite so close to the sovereign. Gosh, that's wonderful, wonderful. What is surprising for me and quite astonishing is the journey from my immediate forebears, who were very ordinary, very working class. I thought we were going to go back on that level, but no way. We've ended up with friendships in very high places, dukes and duchesses, and even afoot into a royal palace. I mean, there was Armand de la Bastide, standard bearer of the household cavalry, fighting fantastically at the Battle of the Boyne with William III. And Joseph de la Plaine, was a man I would love to have met. A man who lived a double life. Very brave. It's been wonderful. It's been a revelation to me. I've discovered the people from whom I have emerged are admirable people.
Who Do You Think You Are continues on Monday at 2:45 with Mark Gattis. Michael Portillo visits the last remaining pumping station in Bridgewater. Great British Railway Journeys is next.